Nikkiolson.
Perfect. And you are an ICU nurse, a traveling ICU nurse. What would be the correct official title for all of this?
I don't know. I'm currently right now. I'm under contract, and I am a traveling ICU, CVICU, MICU, SICU nurse.
How long have you been doing some traveling on the go with nursing, I guess I should ask?
So I've been a nurse for 8-ish years. I have just started traveling. Traveling started for me with my New York City assignments. And so I liked it. There was good and bad with it, but I wanted to continue helping as long as I was able bodied and able to keep doing it.
So you've got a friend that came to visit. Hi, you want to come watch? Come on over here. Your job is to watch this camera for me.
Okay, you can't touch.
You can't touch, but just make sure if it starts to move, you'll know. But watch it for me. You're my photographer, so this is good. So you get to answer all your questions.
To Daniel.
Daniel, are you ready for this? I feel like I should get some shots of this. All right, Daniel, you are helping me out here. All right, action. 3, 2, 1, and we're back at it. So this is the first time you've gone away, and as you mentioned, some good and some bad with the experience. But boy, what a journey! I mean, remarkable is the word I'm thinking. Words to just describe your experience in New York City.
It's really it's changed me as a person. I was talking to my husband about it. I think it's obviously changed me for the good. I think it's opened my eyes to medicine, how it affects people, how we deliver it, how we continue to educate. It just has really changed everything for me. I knew that I would learn a lot, but I didn't know that it would actually almost change my soul. It was very life changing. The things that I witnessed and saw and the connections that I made. I think as a nurse too, a lot of people underestimate the power of family being there because, I'm not going to lie, we all complain about sometimes family is an obstacle, not in a good way sometimes for patient care. But I will say I really did miss patients' families and their input and learning about the patients because I did do this over the phone and I did do this via FaceTime, but it was very different. And, for the families, the hospital experience was very, very different and not in a good way. So the experience, like I said, was very life changing, but I wish there could have been more family involvement and just better all around care with the family involved.
That's the hardest part. You can't, the physical touch, we were just talking about that, even with your own kids, you're not able to give them kisses and smother them with love. And that's probably the same thing, even with families that are saying goodbye to their loved ones, you're probably wanting them to be able to be right close with them, and they can't have that connection. That had to have been so overwhelming because we know touch is so important.
It is, and I like to really touch my patients. I think it's really important. So obviously, patients that are intubated and sedated, I always talk to when I give care. I always let them know what I'm doing, and I talk to them just as if they were awake and conscious because I do feel like hearing is the last sense to go. So even when patients aren't doing well, they're struggling, they're dying, actively dying, I still talk to them and touch them and hold them and, squeeze their hand, hold their hand, caress their face, caress their hair. Because it is really important, and I think this has also made people aware that human touch is powerful. If we didn't have human touch, we would be such cold human beings, and human touch is what makes us actually human. Touch, it's kind of like almost like food, how we have food around every holiday. When we're having a really bad day, we want to be held, we want to be hugged, we want to be cuddled. When we're having a really good day, we want to hug. So human touch is a really important part of our lives, and COVID has shown that when you can't do that, it is almost unbearable for these people that have family members that are really sick.
So you found other ways, as you mentioned hearing, you found other ways to connect with these family members, so much so they wrote you letters, right? They wrote to your house, they asked for your home address. What was that experience like?
So I've taken care of a lot of sick patients. I've taken care of really young patients, really old patients. And like I said, I always try to take care of people as if they're my own family. It's really heartwarming to know.
You can talk and then, yep, go ahead. What's going on?
So has COVID-19 been So today, like, has been COVID-19 been hard for you to control a patient?
Hold on. If we're gonna do this right. Hang on. Can I mic you up for this? Hold on. Put that on your shirt real quick.
Oh my goodness. You're
Hang on. Okay, we've got a reporter in the house here. Okay, now ask Mom your question if you don't mind. Whenever you can get that clip, can you get it? There you go. You got
Yes.
it.
So, can you control COVID-19 when people die? Can you control it when, like, it's around people?
Oh, but don't touch it when you're doing it, otherwise it won't work. Okay, now go ahead and ask your question one more time. 3, 2, 1, and action. Ask your mom.
So, has COVID-19 been hard for you to struggle with patients?
Yes, it has been, because you guys cheer me up every day when I come home from work. Remember when I come home from work, I come through the door, I take off my scrubs, put on my jammies, and what is the first thing I do? I come find you and I hug you and kiss you. And yeah, it's been hard. Because you make all my bad days really good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really hard. Mommy really misses you guys. I miss you a lot, a lot, a lot. It's been really hard to be away. But you know what? My phone has your picture on it. And so whenever I feel really, really sad, I just look at my phone. I just look at my phone and I'm like, man, look at those cute, handsome boys I have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the part where you're talking about stuff, okay? I'll keep this mic on my shirt.
So yeah, you were going through, talking about how heartwarming it was for these letters that have come through and everything. And I just think that's so paramount to your story, that you created intimate relations with people that weren't even you never knew them before, but that's the goal of the nurse, right? I mean, you were called to action, and they needed that love.
So, to answer your question, I think people get it now that I've been in the hospital, but your nurse is with you 99% of the day, and then you have lab, you have other staff, and then you have doctors. And not to diminish their role, because their role is really important, but the person that's with you the most, and that is with your family, and that is with you, holding your hand through the entire journey, is the nurse. And it is so important, to build that relationship and to build that trust with those families, that their family members are in good hands. And to be honest, I mean, I miss my kids and my family as well, and they were really supportive and gave me lots of words of encouragement and phone calls and text messages. But to be honest, a lot of my past patients that I've had, and I don't forget any of them. That's the thing. I don't forget a face. I might forget a last name, but I don't normally forget first names, and I don't normally forget faces. It was so heartwarming to actually see that people were doing well, that they felt well, that they were doing better, and that they loved me and that they cared about me and that they remembered me. And it was very heartwarming and touching, because a lot of times I don't see these patients. I don't discharge them. Normally when you're in ICU, you don't just go straight home. You spend a lot of time in step downs and in rehabs and in different facilities. So I don't always get to see them. And it was nice. It was a nice, way to kind of end their story with me, is I knew they were safe and sound and they weren't in the hospital. They were doing well. And yeah, and that relationship still stands. So, and it's hard with HIPAA, but as long as they acknowledge that they're have been one of my patients, I can say, hi, I remember you, this is your name, and hug them. You know what I mean? I can make that connection. But it's been wonderful, and I enjoy seeing patients and hearing how well they are and hearing from their families.
Wow, it's just remarkable. When even family members that or loved ones that have been lost, I mean, their loved ones still wrote you, just like the card in front of you. How much death, unfortunately, did you have to witness?
A lot. I mean, so ER nurses and ICU nurses normally witness the most death. ICU, I think, because I've had my fair share of experience in the ER, but ICU is probably, I would say, one of the hardest, because ICU, these patients, I mean, yes, there are a few patients that come up and tragically pass away within 10, 12 hours of being there, or even faster. But a lot of times these patients, they're there for weeks, and then we're having to make the heart-wrenching decision if we're going to withdraw care, or if they're going to be organ donors, or if they, get septic and they change and they pass away. So we really build weeks over days and weeks relationships with these families. So to me, it's much harder when someone passes and you really have a relationship with them, even though you might not know them and that person might not be responsive. Their family lets you know who they are as a person. Um, it's sad. I witnessed a lot of death. Um, and the really sad part about it is that they just couldn't oxygenate from COVID. So the patients that were in the unit I worked in the ICU, they had to be COVID positive in order to be in the ICU, in that particular ICU. So, you know, these patients were really struggling to breathe. It was a really ugly picture. And no matter what I did to try to help them, there really wasn't a whole lot that helped. So that is another really hard thing, is a lot of times as a nurse, you can do all kinds of interventions and you get a good outcome or you see some sign of improvement. But with COVID, we really honestly didn't see consistent improvement. And, you know, a lot of these patients had a lot of comorbidities kind of stacked against them. So yeah, it's really hard to be on a sinking ship and none of your normal tricks work. And anything you do really doesn't matter, to be honest. It doesn't work, it's not effective, and these patients aren't doing well. So it was a lot of death and it was a lot of suffering. And a lot of these families, like I said, they had to unfortunately watch these people suffer from afar. And I think COVID in a lot of ways prolonged a lot of deaths, because these patients, it's different when I tell you your loved one is dying and they're not doing well and I show you like a brief, you know, FaceTime picture. It's very different when you can actually come in the hospital room and witness it for yourself and see that yes, they're breathing, but their personality is no longer there. So we were keeping people alive for a really long time that had really no meaningful recovery. And in my mind, I am hoping and praying they did not suffer. I mean, it's hard for us to tell, but it's just hard. It's really hard to see people. I mean, people were intubated for over 30 days. They were, you know, on a ventilator for over 30 days. They weren't getting trached, which is normally kind of what happens. They were requiring a lot of life support. When I say life support, I mean like drips to keep their blood pressure up, the ventilator, a lot of oxygen. Just there was a lot of care that was given to keep these people at a minimal function.
You were there for close to 2 months, April?
It was like almost 9 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay, got it. So more than that. And then, you know, during that experience, towards the very end, the last and final week, you had kind of an out-of-body wild experience, right? I mean, you've been on the front lines of COVID, and then you went on the front lines of the protest route, essentially. Yeah. Didn't even realize any of that was going to be happening. I was hoping you'd share that story.
Yeah. So let me rewind though, because this is hysterical, and I've shared some with some people, but so from like start to finish, my ride in New York City has been insane. And I'll start off with this. So I had 18 hours from my last shift until I had to be in New York City. So I was
looking at the camera. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I was working full time, so I had 18 hours to get to the Brooklyn and Manhattan VA, so New York City essentially. There, because of COVID, flights were like non-existent. I caught the last flight out of Chicago. I had to fly to Minnesota, and then I had to fly to JFK. I didn't get in until midnight. I actually had a family friend pick me up and take me to my apartment. My apartment was in Bed-Stuy, which is hit or miss on a good and bad area. But I didn't have a car because the rental car places were shut down, and I didn't know the train system. So I thought, oh, I'll just bike to work. Well, it was a 10, almost 11-mile bike ride. And Brooklyn has mountains. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but Brooklyn has mountains. So it took me like 2.5 hours to get to the hospital. Once I got to the hospital, because I rented a city bike, on Fort Hamilton, because it's the only Army base in New York City, there's no bikes. Like there's nothing really in the Air Force Base. So I had to bike 4 miles back to Costco and bike and dock my bike. And then once I did that, I Ubered to work. I was still on time, okay? Still on time. But I was running on like 3 hours of sleep. I was sweaty. I was just not having it. So then on the way home, some coworkers recommended I take the bus and the train. So I had to take 2 buses and a train to get home. The second bus I caught, I didn't realize you had to pull the handle to get off. I wound up on Rikers Island. He thought that I was a prison nurse. I went across the bridge, and then unfortunately, obviously, at the security checkpoint, I'm like, yeah, I am not supposed to be here. I am an employee of a different hospital. I need to go back to my house, my apartment in Brooklyn. This is definitely not where I'm supposed to be. So after that experience, I was like ready to come home. Things got better though. Like 2 weeks later, I rented a car and I moved closer. But then you fast forward at the end of my stay. George Floyd unfortunately passed away at the hands of the police, and it caused a lot of chaos and protesting, and I do support it. I support Black Lives Matter. I support everything that they're protesting for. I absolutely 100% support it. It was just scary for me because in New York City, there's a lot of homeless people, and with COVID, it's gotten better. They've been putting a lot of homeless people up in hotels, but the homeless people, actually, there's still a lot on the street that are not in hotels. And the issue that I was facing is, so in the financial district south of Boston, they were like, not the protesters, but other people were vandalizing like City Hall. They were vandalizing Gracie Mansion where Mayor de Blasio lives. They were burning police cars. There was also vandalism to a bunch of stores and people's property, like cars on the street. I was panicking because I had a rental car and it happened to be a brand new rental car, and I didn't want any issues. So then I moved to Times Square. I thought, well, that's pretty heavily secured, so that'd be better. It ended up not being a good idea. And I went to the Hamptons for a weekend right after I moved because I hadn't really had a weekend off. So I wanted to relax. I came home to my hotel and it was chaos. So I lived on 42nd Street, and that's like the heart of Times Square, but they barricaded 35th to like 48th, and it was between 8th and 9th Avenue. They like essentially you could not get in. You couldn't get in, you couldn't get out once curfew set. And so my shift at the VA was 7:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. So right at the start of curfew, I wasn't even out of the hospital. So I had to show every form of ID known to man with a letter so I could get across the Brooklyn Bridge back to Manhattan. And then I had to park my car at Grand Central Station and try to walk between each barricade so I could get in. And it was hit or miss. You know, a lot of the barricades were filled with a lot of people. I really didn't want to crowd surf, if you will. I didn't want to push my way through to try to get in. So I would just keep going and walking kind of in a rectangle. And normally I would walk between like 10 and 20 blocks just to get to my hotel and to see who would let me in. And actually on Monday night, I had a really just long day at work, and I was just super emotional. I was hungry because, mind you, the curfew had set in, so a lot of stores were shutting down. And so it was really hard to get food. And I was hungry. I was really tired. I had a rough day, and I was hysterical. And I wasn't like afraid of the protesters. You know, I think some people might think that's what I was referencing, but I'm not afraid of the protesters. I was afraid of the fact that there was a lot of homeless people that were throwing like liquor bottles and anything that they could, trash, whatever they could at the police. And I live right next to the Port Authority, and so they had one side of the sidewalk completely blocked off, so I had to walk in the line of fire. And I was just really fearful because it was the end of my contract, and I just wanted to get home to my husband and children safely. And I just, you know, I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't expecting it. I was really overly tired. I was in tears. There was the last barricade I came up to, there was probably about 100, 200 protesters. They were very loud. They were very aggressive towards the police, not toward me, but towards the police. And I kind of walked in front of them because I was at my kind of like my wit's end. I had needed to get home, and I was running out of options. And they actually saw me, and they all really kind of turned and looked at me. They all parted like the Red Sea and let me through. I didn't really know how to react. I just fell to my knee, kind of just in solidarity, because I 100% support what they're doing. I 100% understand. I just, at that moment in time, I was crying, and they could see that I was visibly upset, not by them, but just upset. And I was in my scrubs and my scrub cap, clean scrubs, of course, but scrubs. And they let me through. The police let me through. The protesters let me through. I was unharmed. I was so like filled with emotion. I was happy tears. It was sad tears. It It was a lot. New York is a lot to take in on a normal basis, but then you add COVID and then the unfortunate circumstance and event that happened in Minneapolis. And it just adds a whole nother level of complexity to the city. And the city, you know, in general, when I first got there, everyone was super nice and welcoming, and everyone, even when I left, was still very welcoming. Um, but the mood changed. It's like when I left, everything was vacant. Everything was boarded up. It was really hard to get anywhere. It was crazy. And even with curfew, people were still out. It was nuts. And it was just something I was so physically tired from being there for 8 weeks that I didn't have any more fight left in me. And I wanted to get home. So, and I'm glad I'm here, but I'm not here for much longer.
You're going to Yale next, right?
Yep.
Connecticut?
Yep.
You know, 1 week, you're here 1 week and then you're going back. Why would you do something like that?
They have a lot of sick people right now. They have like 112 beds in their MICU, and just speaking with the manager, they're really, really sick, and they really needed me sooner. But I graciously asked her if I could just have 5 days to come home since I was COVID negative. If I was having symptoms, even if I was COVID negative, I probably wouldn't have come home at all. I probably would have quarantined for a couple days and then head to work. But since I was symptom free and negative, I did want to come home for a couple days at least to see my kiddos, and get everything kind of situated with my business and affairs at home. And so, yeah, I mean, I really want to help. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of sick people. And I just, I want to do my part and, make my kids proud. Because at the end of the day, the little ones are watching. And, when the world is falling apart and people need you, I think it's important that people find their place, whatever that may be, and help. Because, at the end of the day, I would help anyone. I help strangers every day. I would help anyone. Anyone shows up on my doorstep, I would help them. It's just the right thing to do. And it's the right thing to do when no one's watching. And I just want to be, I think in my goal in life, I want to make my kids proud, and I want to do the right thing. So when they get older, the right thing is their first instinct. And I want them to become successful, positive people and contribute to society.
How are they reacting to all that you've done? They've got to be so proud of you, I would imagine.
They are, I'm gonna cry thinking about it. So my youngest that was in here, he has autism and ADHD. He has a lot of struggles. He's come a really long way. I'm really proud of him. But he has a hard time with emotion, and it made me really proud because it's been about 2 weeks now since he said it. But he heard me crying. I was crying to my husband. I'd had a really long day. I was tired. And I just said, I'm excited to come home. And he got on the phone and he's like, Mommy, don't worry about us. Between my dad, which is my ex-husband, Kyle, and my husband, Tyler, he's like, the two dads are taking great care of us. But your patients are really, really sick and they need you. And we love you. But we want you to take care of your patients. And it was so sweet. I was just like in tears. It was just, I was just like, buddy. And my first mom instinct was like, you recognized that I was sad, and you recognized why I was sad, and you made an appropriate, comments, and you correlated the fact that I was in New York. I was just so proud as a mom, because it's like, for him to have autism and for him just to recognize my emotions and not make inappropriate comments and to understand what's going on just like blew my mind. And then on top of it, for it to be so incredibly sweet, it was like the icing on the cake. But as a whole, my kids are really sad that I'm leaving, but they understand. And they understand kind of the why behind it. So it does make it easier, but thank goodness for FaceTime. Because without FaceTime, this would be really, really hard. But also, too, without the support of my ex-husband and my husband and my mom and dad and family, I couldn't do this.
It's your calling. You have to, and that's how I think you feel about it. What do you think? You come back home. Some people are wearing masks. Some people are social distancing. Some people are not. How is that weighing on your heart, seeing what your community looks like right now?
For me, I guess I'm a very black and white person. And there were even COVID cases at my full-time job before I left, so I knew kind of the agony that it caused. I think for me, it's really hard for me to watch a slow-moving train wreck. And I mean, even before COVID, we have lots of patients that are frequent flyers that come in all the time. They have chronic diseases, and whether it's they can't afford their meds, they don't want to take their meds, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch someone almost damage themselves, if that makes sense, inflict things on themselves. It's hard. We have a lot of drug overdoses. And it's hard for me to watch these patients. Like, you can only want them to do what's best, and that's why nursing in general is continuous education until you're blue in the face. But for me, I get it. I get people want to have a choice. I get people, I really think social media has skewed education, health education in general as a whole, because there's a lot of bad information out there. I love people so much. I don't want them to be my patient. Like, I want to be friends with people outside of work. I don't want to go to work and make friends, if that makes sense. I don't want to have, friends of mine be my patients, because I see the agony and heartbreak that it causes. And there's just so much that we don't know yet. And there's just so much that it's a shot in the dark if certain treatments work. I just don't want to cause heartbreak for more families. If people don't want to wear a mask, I totally get it. But I at least ask, and pray that they social distance, and wash their hands. I mean, even, cold and flu season is about to hit us in the next couple of months. And that's going to be really hard too with COVID. Just, washing your hands. I get people, if they don't want to wear a mask, I get it. But, I really wish people would see the greater good, that it's not really just about them. It's just about people as a whole. And this really honestly kind of runs the same line as vaccines. We get our flu vaccine not to just protect us, but to give herd immunity to others and protect other people. And that's kind of what the mask is in general. Is it's not really necessarily about yourself. It's just protecting everyone, and everyone's vulnerable in some, form or fashion. And that's why I think in New York City more people wore masks, is simply because everyone I talked to, whether it was the hotel manager, the cleaning staff at the hotel, the food staff at the hotel, the gentleman that helped me with my groceries at the corner store, they were all affected by COVID. They knew one person, whether it was a relative, a friend, a child, a parent, that either passed away or was very severely ill from COVID. And so to them, it wasn't like, people had to remind them, or they had to be almost like mask shamed. They did it because they knew. I really honestly, unfortunately, think sometimes in this world and in Wisconsin and other states, people unfortunately have to learn by example, or have to learn the hard way. And I think it's very unfortunate, but sometimes people just don't do what's best for them or do the right thing. And sometimes they have to learn. And COVID in general is a huge learning curve for everyone, but it makes me sad. It really does. I went to Walmart to get some groceries, and literally no one had masks on. I just don't want anything bad to happen. And if a mask could have prevented them from either spreading the virus or contracting it, I think it's a small price that we have to pay to keep everyone safe. And I don't think it's forever, but in the interim, I think it's a really important practice that we should uphold.
What does your heart tell you about, I mean, I always like trying to look at the big picture of things.
Yeah.
This is, I know your heart is overwhelmed with emotion, but your heart also tells you this is exactly what you need to be doing right now, right?
Yeah, so I don't have a crystal ball. I can't foresee the future. My kids are out of school right now. I don't know how much longer I'll be traveling. I don't know if this will be like a yearly thing that I'll do. I don't know. I do know I am disaster trained. So if there is a natural disaster, I think it's kind of my duty to go help others. So like, Hurricane Sandy, different things that have affected our country. I think it's important for people to help in those times of need. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a second wave of COVID. I think there probably will be. I hope not. I don't know what the future holds for me. I'm not going to say no to travel nursing, but if the need is there, and it's feasible for my family, I would like to help, but it really just depends. It depends on the state of my household and how my kiddos and husband are holding up. But I don't know. I don't know where this journey is going to take me. I don't know, I don't know if I'm gonna go back to my full-time job. There's a lot of unanswered questions. I don't know. I just wanna help the most amount of people that I can and make a difference.